I would like to introduce today's speakers, starting with our esteemed board member, Dr. Stephen Peters. Stephen has been a classroom teacher, assistant principal, director of secondary education, and a superintendent of schools. He has served on panels as an educator expert with the former U.S. Secretary of Education, Dr. Rod Page, in Washington, D.C. Dr. Peters also served as the president of the board of directors for the International Literacy Association in 2021. He is the author of several of my favorite books, and they are award-winning and best-selling books, including Do You Know Enough About Me to Teach Me? Teaching to Capture and Inspire All Learners, and recently co-authored One, a Process for Everyone and Everyone. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Mark Wilson. Dr. Wilson has been teaching leadership through classes, coaching, and consulting. He's worked with leaders throughout the U.S. and leads multiple innovative leadership efforts throughout Georgia. Mark has collaborated with departments of education, research, school systems, national associations, and thought leaders across the country. Before his current work supporting and developing leaders, Mark was the principal of Morgan County High School in Madison, Georgia, where, because of the great work of his teachers, students, and parents, he was named the National Principal of the Year by the National Association of Secondary School Principals. Wow, what a lineup. I'm so excited. Welcome, Mark. Welcome, Stephen.
Thanks, Amelia.
Thank you, Amelia. It's good to be here.
Thank you. We are so thrilled to have you with us for this important conversation. And I want to start with your incredible experience. I want both of you to comment on this. In your current work, consulting with and delivering professional development for educators, leaders, what do you feel is the biggest challenge leaders are facing right now? And what is your advice to them as they navigate these turbulent waters? I'm going to start with you, Stephen.
Wow, what a loaded question right out of the gate. I'll answer the first part with one word: time. Time. Time is always one of the complexities of an educational leader's work. Trying to navigate the urgent. Everything is urgent right now. The pandemic came and it issued some harsh truths to public education. But one of those truths was we can no longer do this work in isolation. So what you're doing right now through the American Reading Company and what Mark and I are engaged in, the work around the country, is helping people navigate that space. But by creating a safe and constructive space for them to say, hey, nobody has ever done this work before. And so it's a very vulnerable state for leaders, for teachers, for parents, for support staff. And so everybody is now looking for a new way to do this work, a new way to advance this work. And my advice is to think about the iceberg metaphor, right? Mm-hmm. You can see what's up top, but what's below that water, we need to pay attention to as well. And when we become aware of what's below that surface in the iceberg, we need to do things to anticipate, to react, to disrupt, and to transform. And so if we can then fine-tune our scope to those things, we then simplify the complexities of the work, and then we can refine the time that we spend doing this work.
Wow. Yeah, it is what is under the water that sinks the ship, right? Not what is above that we can see. So true. Mark, what about you?
Thanks, Amelia. Always good to be with my friend and brother, Stephen Peters, and I'm grateful we've written a book together, but we've had many other adventures beyond that. So I do want to say it's always good to be with Stephen and good to be with so many of you again. And friends out there and new friends to hopefully to make. Want to thank ARC for having us here. And I do want to say those things up front. And I'll take your lead, Stephen, and I'll throw out one word. And I'm going to pick the word confidence. Confidence is such a key for anyone who's leading, for anyone who's learning. Remember that learning at its essential is this combination of curiosity and vulnerability. And you have to be in a safe place, as Stephen discusses. You have to be where you can trust that you're going to be supported rather than judged. Leading and learning are so similar, and they require these same elements. And the whole issue that I see, Amelia, some of the things are different because the world is different now than it was 3 years ago. And that's a fact. However, even then, I think one of the biggest battles we all face is that fight that's going on internally, fighting our insecurities, our doubts about what we're capable of doing, and being able to have confidence and be in systems, Stephen, that allow us the opportunity to have the productive struggle, to be able to trip and fall but get up again. I think so many of our people, Stephen, in addition to not having time, they don't have the environment that is necessary for you to truly succeed. And that's an environment where you can experiment, you can learn, you can fail productively. So many of our people are obsessed with perfection because of all the pressure that's on them. They face that with the limited time that Stephen talked about. Those two things put together, they make it really hard for people to lead schools. And what Stephen and I hope to do, and when you said the mission of ARC, Amelia, it made me smile because now I know there's yet another group of people who are hoping to do the same thing. And that is, we have to bolster the individuals who are doing the work so that we can collectively be the light that puts out the darkness, the good that pushes back on the negativity, the positive that makes a difference in kids' lives. And it's about life, it's about living, it's about liberty, it's about learning. It's all of those pieces.
So interesting, Mark, as you spoke, I think so often that is what we want for kids, but we don't think of ourselves as that. And so I think there's a big message here, folks. What we want for our kids, we must want for our teachers and our leaders too. It's not just the kids, right? Everybody learns. Thank you for saying that. Now, both of you have had jobs, and I hope that you are listening because you can tell these people did it. These people did it, right? The way they talk, they have been there. So you have been there. You have done that. You have taken over districts or schools. What were some of the challenges that you saw when it came to literacy, like literacy engagement, literacy volume, literacy joy, happiness? And so what were some of the things that you saw and what steps did you take to start turning the ship? Stephen, like you said, you brought in the ship. Let's turn it over. Go ahead.
Well, not only have we been there and done that, we've also gone back to do it again, right? I mean, we were working in schools in different capacities, and I've been away for 13 years helping others do the work and realizing that things have changed. So I actually went back in to do it again. And in doing so, in full transparency to everybody here today, and in that spirit of vulnerability, I found when I went back in to do this work again after being away from it, that literacy leadership was far away from me. And so for those of you who are listening now, who are leaders, Mark used the word judgment. This is not judgment. This is transparency, that you realize that there's so much more that you need to know. And so as a leader, I started looking at our professional development calendar for when our literacy specialists had meetings, and I went and sat beside them because I knew as a superintendent, I needed to know as much as I could to make well-informed decisions that were lateral budget, PD, the number of days that we allocated, how children had access to the needs that we were able to fill, because equity is giving children what they need when they need it, but you've got to give the adults what they need when they need it in order to deliver that same pattern to children. So from a vantage point of a leader, literacy leadership was something that I and many of my colleagues that I served with felt like that's their work. I don't reside there. They live there. And so when I went back the second time, I realized that we need big wins in education. We need to knock it out. We don't need to get up to bat and get a base hit. We need grand slam home runs. We need bases loaded, ball knocked out of the ballpark. And I found a foundation of literacy. When you build a culture of literacy in a school district, you're hitting grand slams, right? And so seeing is believing. And I believe, because of my personal experience of having a grandson who was able to graduate high school at 16 years old with a high school diploma in one hand and a 2-year college associate's degree in the other hand, and a 34 on the ACT, that literacy is the way to go, because this kid never had to be forced to read. He had a joy for reading since he was 3-4 years old. Early literacy, the earlier, the better, the more volume, the better. And so watching Amari go through elementary, middle, and high school, I mean, he was finished high school in the 10th grade. And the common correlation was literacy. He had a joy for reading. We would take walks and he would have a 400-page novel on his forearm. He wouldn't even take a walk.
Walking and reading.
Walking and reading. And the question wasn't, are you reading? The question was, what are you reading?
What are you reading?
And so, rich content text, the more he read, the more he wanted to read. And so as a leader, the second time around, I had a refreshing, rejuvenating feeling about literacy being the foundation for all work to be done in our school district.
Thank you, thank you. And as I turn to you, Mark, like Stephen just talked about his grandson, that in high school, he came in, right? And he was able to accomplish so much. You were the principal of a high school. And so often when kids don't come in with that, they don't have the same opportunities. They cannot take all the electives. They cannot, right? The limits are placed because there are things they have to do in order to graduate. As a principal, what was that challenge like? And what were you able to do to reach those kids?
So Amelia, one of the keys to be able to promote literacy or to promote anything within a school is to be able to develop that sense of purpose and that sense of mission and vision together with your people. And one of the biggest challenges, I know we already said time and confidence, Stephen, but another challenge of school leadership is the frequent turnover. When I wish that we operated with like a business plan. I think we're supposed to, but we really don't, where the school improvement plan is the school improvement plan and it moves forwards. But schools that I have been around everywhere tend to follow the leader, and therefore a lot of things that get started don't get finished or don't get continued. I've learned by tripping and falling and doing things wrong that only what you involve a lot of people in, not just the implementation, but the creation, that is how you build something that'll stick. And honestly, we have some urgency and we only have so much time to be able to do work. So we should be about doing the work that doesn't just band-aid today. It should be work that lasts. And to me, what I've learned from that is bringing people together, finding the people who are interested, and rather, there's so much of the archetype of leaders that you're supposed to have all the answers. And I push back on that and say, you just need to actually really know the right questions to ask, because those were more powerful for me at my work than ever was my answers. Amelia, I was a part, before I went to Morgan County, I was at Palmetto High School in Williamston, South Carolina, and we started, we had a great program, but it started with a question. And the question was, why do so few of our students graduate? Our graduation rate was in the 60s. And we answered that question with, there seems to be this indicator that none of them pass very many classes in the 9th grade. So we continue to just pull that thread, Amelia, and keep asking questions. And we got down to those questions: literacy, organization, doing poorly on tests. And then we were able to build a program that worked for that. We went in 1 year from 72% of our kids passing 6 or more classes to 94% in 1 year. And 20 years later, they've never dropped below 90%. And 4 years after that initial group, their grad rate was in the 90s. And I say that because whatever it is we do as leaders, whatever the topic may be, our process to include, involve, and empower people is necessary before we can ever go about the work. So the question to begin with about literacy is, what question do we ask that attracts the right people to come to the table to answer the question?
Oh, I'm so inspired. I have to remember that I'm facilitating this conversation, because I'm so like, I want to just talk to you, and we need to have you back just to talk about 9th grade. This is a big deal. This is the make it or break it, and there are things we can do to, but I hope you heard, like Stephen said, pretty much what I want for my grandson, I would want for everybody else, right? And Mark came in and said, you cannot tell people what to do, but you can ask the right question and get the right people, and then develop the plan from there. And I think what you said is so important, Mark, because people think about people turnover, but they don't think sometimes of like direction turnover, right? And I think what you brought up is really important. How do we get in the right direction, but we stick with it? So thank you. Now, right now, like we have had the pandemic, NAEP scores, there's this heightened sense of urgency when it comes to accelerating growth. When people feel like that, you can do the right things or you can do the wrong things, right? How do you balance like this sense of urgency with the need to build this consensus, teacher buy-in, family buy-in, student buy-in, especially when it comes to like literacy? How do you do that?
Yeah, so Amelia, it's not what we've been doing. There's a need right now for what we call courageous abandonment of past practices because they don't work, right? We are in a season right now where opportunities are brilliantly disguised as impossibilities. And when people feel the work is impossible, it's hard to advance the work. So it's amazing that Mark just talked about people's confidence, because as I was looking at some of the questions and thinking through all of the experiences that we've had, it's kind of hard to pull each and every one. So we've got to activate the right experiences for the time that we have allotted today. But I believe that 50% of doing the work is believing the work can be done. That if you can get a group of people to truly believe the work can be done, you're 50% there. And then the other percentage up to 100 is finding the right process alignment, system alignment, making sure that the system, the operating system of your school or district is aligned to the realities the students face, the realities our teachers face. Prior to the pandemic, we very seldom included support staff. So we have now been convinced of the critical importance of support staff members. Those who drive buses, those who serve and prepare food in the cafeteria, the custodians. These people are so important. The paraprofessionals assisting the teachers in the classroom, so important. And I think it comes down to the power of a 3-letter word, and, A-N-D. In the past, we were making choices. Should we do this or that? Now, after the pandemic, we should be asking the questions and realizing we have to do this and that. So one size does not fit all. Programs do not move the needle, right? People do. And so how do we get the best of people? We help them to understand that we can only give what we're full of, number one. So in this season, self-care is a must. It is a priority from the superintendent to the principal, to the teachers, to the support staff members, to everybody working with kids in schools, that we have to be aware that in order to give, we have to have a reservoir filled with things that we want to give to our schools, to our communities. And so we have to carefully construct ways that we, number one, take better care of ourselves, so that when we show up to do the work, we are bringing our best self to do our best work. But without vision, somebody leading that work, because leadership is influence, you've got to have not good leaders today, Amelia. We need great leaders in our schools who understand that title doesn't mean anything, but how you create trusted relationships with people in that workspace will correlate with what you do with kids in that workspace.
So there are so many layers, right? And I want to call attention to something that you said, and I'm going to ask Mark to expand on it a little bit, because you started by saying it's also important for us to remove some things from our plates, right? So because that typically doesn't happen, right? We keep adding in, but we don't stop the things that did not work. But yesterday, Mark, and I'm going to pass it on to you in terms of like calling attention to what do we stop doing. I want you to talk a little bit about that, because yesterday I was working with a team and they started talking about everything that they are doing. And I stopped for a second and I said, can I ask you a question? Are kids reading every day? Are kids talking every day? Are kids writing every day during this time? You know, and I said, that has to be your screener. If they're not reading every day, talking every day, and writing every day, what is getting in the way of this? So how do you go through this process of prioritization? Can you talk a little bit about that, Mark?
Absolutely. This is something I coach principals and assistant principals, and I have classes for aspiring leaders, for all leaders. And this is one of the top topics. If we were playing Family Feud, you'd probably click number one on this one, is priority. Because as the leader, remember, when we're in the classroom, we have a set schedule and we change based on the clock. When you become a school administrator, you have to figure out what you're supposed to do. You get a general idea from someone who supervises you, but within the day, you make choices on what you do. One of my biggest messages to school leaders is your choices determine what level of success you're going to reach. And you ultimately have to ask yourself, when you're a school leader, what is my job? And then work towards, now how do I remove obstacles to get me to that job? And it's a process. I hate to spoil it by getting to what I think is an answer, maybe not the answer, but I think our jobs as school administrators is to help other people be better in their jobs, not to make their job easier, not to do all these other things, but help others get better. And toward that end, we can spend a lot of time and a lot of energy, both of those depletable resources that we always are fighting about. Stephen said time. I would add money and energy to that. Is we're running out of energy faster than we're running out of time, because, as you said, Amelia, people everywhere have that same experience that you were sharing. So many things that they're doing. You can't put adequate energy for success when you have too many things on the board. How to do this, the how of this, there has to be a belief among the people who are in supervisory and the top authorities of a school system to go through a process with their people to decide, now these are the things that matter the most. I talk to school administrators everywhere, and they get mixed messages from, we want student improvement, and we also want wellness for all of our teachers. So go and really tighten it down and get those teachers to really do more, but make them feel better about it. That is not the recipe for success in any industry, but particularly one who has a drought of resources in terms of teachers coming in. But you know what people will do, and it's what Stephen Peters said. There is there's an X and Y axes about how much work you have to do to keep your job. Well, there are people every day who they decide to give more. But why is it they decide to do more? And I think that can be described as the leadership effect, because if a leader is able to get people to focus on a goal, to have a vision, that's when people will do not only just more, but then they have to get their job, but they'll do better. They will engage in something. They will not do something because it's a requirement, but because they see the value in it. I still believe we have lots of people who want to do something that matters and that makes a difference. But we have to stop burning up all of their fuel on stuff that doesn't matter and doesn't make a difference.
So I think the message here is that we do have choices within parameters. We do have choices, and the choices we make are not neutral. They impact outcomes for kids. So I think it's and the conversation has to be deep, right? Because like even yesterday, as I was unpacking this situation, that there was so much going on that was not giving the return on investment, was not getting kids in front of text. We really started building consensus on what they had imposed on themselves, right? And Stephen, like you said, that programs alone don't make a difference. But I have to tell you, like, I think design really matters for equity. And if you have a design that have all kids in mind versus just some kids, that is going to make the work easier. And I wanna talk to you, Stephen, because you wrote this book. I think it's one of the most important books I have ever read. Do you know enough about me to teach me? You said you think about equity as giving each kid what they need when they need. How do you really equip leaders and teachers to be able to first know what their kids need in order to then give them what they need to succeed? What is your message from the one size fits all to do you know enough about me to teach me without overwhelming them, right?
Right, correct. Well, first of all, personalized learning is not new, right? Personalized learning happened in Colleton County in Walterboro, South Carolina, when I was a little boy, where my teachers lived in my neighborhood. And they wanted for me and my brothers and sisters what they wanted for their children who lived in their homes. And I'll never forget one of my teachers coming up to my front door after school one day and knocking on the door. And my heart was beating so fast because I was trying to figure out what I did in school that would warrant a visit from my teacher at my house. And when my mother answered the door, she said, I won't stay long. I just wanted to tell you what a phenomenal young man you're raising, right? You have no idea what that did for me as a 10-year-old. And I remember that when I became a teacher. So I began calling students' homes, not to report that they did something bad at school, but to say, what a phenomenal young lady you're raising. What a phenomenal young man you're raising. Then I realized that some of the toughest students in my class were helping me to run my class. That's when I learned to make my students part of my management team. And when I became an assistant principal and the principal, it transferred from the classroom to the school. When I became a superintendent, it transferred from the schools to the whole school district. In order to be able to identify what a child needs, you have to know that child. And you also have to know that every child is different, right? We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So it's very, very important that we invest time, energy, and our talent and our gifts to be able to help children identify their gifts. Personal stories for me, I mean, my teacher saw that I was a great writer. She said I was a prolific writer in the 7th grade. I wanted to be a basketball player. What are you talking about? I'm a prolific writer. Didn't you see me score all those points at the game last night? And so my teacher knew enough about me and my family that she knew we had the basketball thing covered. But she wanted me to understand I had the capacity to go to Harvard University if I wanted to. And that's the key, is I wanted to pose the question to teachers and those working with children, a question that I believe we ought to answer unequivocally, yes, I do. And when no is the answer, that we are making sure that we have policies and processes in place to be able to do better. Because when we know better, we have to do better. You know, we know, the more we know about our students, the better quality education we're going to be able to provide for them.
And Stephen, I think that I know you, I've known you for years, and this goes for everything, right? If they don't have books at home, you give them books. If they don't have this at home, you make sure that they, and I think this is critical for us, is that we serve a different role right now. Yesterday, I was meeting with a young lady, 7 years old, Stephen. And I started talking to her, and she said to me, I like to read, but I really don't have books.
Mm.
And I said, tell me what kinds of books you like and why are you not reading? She said, I have a lot of chores. And the more I heard, it's a complicated life for a 7-year-old. She has a lot of responsibilities. And that changed all of the adults in the room because we got to know her. But your book was in my head. You know, and we had a plan for her. She walked away with books that she wanted. She walked away with a check-in plan, but it's not what we had in mind at first. And it took getting to know her to better serve her. Mark, can you do that in high schools?
Absolutely. You have to, I was speaking at a conference one time, Amelia, and we were talking about the nature of teaching. And I had a lady who was there, and she had previously taught kindergarten at one part of her career, but she'd also taught 11th grade. And I asked her, I said, where's the better teaching? And she said, at kindergarten. I said, why? And she said, in kindergarten, we follow the student, we follow the learner. And in high school, we're very much apt to make the learner follow us. And
Wow.
see what you did yesterday when you were talking about your story, Amelia, that was good teaching on your part because you followed the learner. And that's how we engage people in a meaningful way to them. See, we often talk about relationships. We talk about trust. There's a continuum though, and it doesn't actually begin with relationships. Relationships, if nothing else, what are they than a conversation that continues over time and space? But before you get to that, before you get to conversations, there are connections. Connections lead to relationships. Relationships yield trust. That's the ROI of relationships. And that's where you are able to present influence. And teachers and leaders, Stephen, we're all influencers. People talk about influencers now. I'm like, dude, we've been influencing like forever. Like, you think you're big because you call that on Snapchat or TikTok. Like, man, I've been an influencer since 1986 when I had my first class. So because and even in the social media world, it's the same thing. It's a connection, and then a relationship, and then trust, and then influence. And then from that point, you get enough people together and they're able to do things that matter. I often, names are so big, and I teach people how to learn people's names. When I teach class, even if I only have people once a month, I'm going to be calling them by their name in the first 5 minutes. And I will run into administrators from time to time, and they'll go, well, I'm just not very good at names. And I'll say, well, you just aren't going to be very good at leadership. And so let's learn some skills, because names, that is the minimum. You've got to, you know what? Everybody that worked for me, that worked with me at the high school, I knew their name, and I knew 25 things about them. I knew their dog's name. I knew their favorite song. Same thing for Stephen Peters. Like, Stephen Peters is like Mr. Connection. Like, you could like just pull things out of a hat, and he would like, oh yeah, I know somebody who's from that place. Like, that connection, it leads to the relationship, because trust allows us to learn. We have to have trust to be vulnerable. And that's why his book is one of my favorites. I have an autographed copy because
me too.
I know everyone should have one, but like that whole notion, you've got to know people to be able to teach them. And I keep begging him to write the second book, Do You Know Enough About Me to Lead Me? Because I think it's the same thing. Now I've just put it out there, Stephen.
What a great. So, but I think hearing both of you, the lesson that I'm taking away is nobody wants to be anonymous. Kids don't want to be anonymous. Adults don't want to be anonymous.
Wow.
And you know, Stephen, it reminds me when you were talking and Mark was talking, I brought American Reading to my high schools when I was an assistant superintendent in Florida, to my intensive reading classes, because the kids were miserable and the teachers were miserable. And I brought the system that the kids would choose books to read, choose books that they were interested in, and they would also conference with the teacher more frequently over time. And I sent my videographer to videotape the classes. And you know what happened? The teacher said the behavior problems went away over and over again. The teacher said, there are no more behavior problems. You know what the kids said? They know me. I have time with them. They help me choose a book that I like. So when you were talking, I'm going like, that was it. They were not anonymous anymore.
It's magic.
Oh, it's just, I'm so touched.
Magic. Yeah. I had a wonderful summer experience working under the tutelage of Dr. James Comer, Child Development Center.
Graduate school. Yes.
And Dr. Comer just branded us with the fact that, and I quote, no significant teaching and learning takes shape in the absence of a significant relationship. He didn't say relationship, he said a significant relationship. And I truly believe that the cornerstone of highly successful leaders and teachers reside in that adaptive space, relationships, significant relationships. Angela, my wife, and I, years ago, after I went through that process, I was all in. We truly believe that we need to simplify this complexity in education. The teaching and learning process is really 3 steps. We capture our students, we inspire our students, and then our students give us their permission to teach them. right? So step one, capture, what is that? Giving students a reason to learn. Step two, inspire. What happens there?
Yeah,
Well, we give students a reason to learn from us,
that's
right?
right.
I'm your teacher and you couldn't have a better teacher. You're so lucky
Yes.
to have me as your teacher. It's just like principals. I mean, no teachers want a principal that's like every other principal. They want a principal that they feel like, we've got the best principal in this district. We've got the best principal in the district. Same holds true for superintendents. People want to be led by people that inspire them, right? And so that third step is in reverse order, because for years we've been trying to teach first, and it's not the first step.
No,
And so the relationship is the first step.
thank you.
Amelia, you said that nobody wants to be invisible. Most people don't want to be invisible, but I tell you who does want to be invisible is a teacher who isn't completely into what we're doing, a
Yeah.
student who isn't doing great in school. And
Yes.
it's actually this visibility, knowing people's names, knowing things about them. There are a lot of people that in a school setting, in an environment where invisibility is accepted and people don't know people's names, they can hide and they can just pass through the building, either as an employee or as a student, and really not connect with the learning or connect with other people. So I do think that when people become more visible, they are able to connect. And then once that trust happens, Stephen, that I watched things that Stephen did as superintendent, and he was hitting around at it. One of the things that was so amazing was how immersive Stephen Peters was, and how as a leader, and how he still is, but he brings people in, and all of that leads to that trust. That trust, it gave us this opportunity when I was at Morgan County High School. Each of our teachers we selected a book that we liked and had ourselves. Lisa Adams, this amazing media specialist we had, she photographed it. We all kind of wrote, here's why you ought to read the book. But in front of everybody's door, secretaries, principal, it doesn't matter who they are, we all had this is what I'm reading now. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of our boys are often our most reluctant readers, but when they walk into one of their coaches' rooms and they're like, this is what they're reading, you know what? We had people who began to talk about that. And then we, emerging from that, were book clubs, because choice, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, that's what makes people enjoy reading and want to be want to be involved in that culture. We did a lot of things that other people did. We did Drop Everything and Read, where everybody across the whole school, custodians, secretary, we stopped school for 30 minutes and everyone reads. And my whole idea on that was, it doesn't matter what you're reading. I want you to read something. I'm going to read something. We're all going to read. But it's like anything else, really, Stephen. Whatever gets talked about is what gets done.
Mhm.
And you can't pick 15 things. So if you really want to focus on literacy, and I think you should, because what is that essential thing that really so many other things spin off of? Well, it's literacy. And it's the confidence that one gets from, I can read the book. And then it's that whole trust of, like, I'm reading the same book that Coach Malone, my football coach, is reading.
That's
like,
huge.
How
That's
cool
huge.
is that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It reminds me, 2 days ago, I was working with a middle schooler, and he said he doesn't like to read. He doesn't like to read. And I started asking him, what kinds of shows do you like to watch? And we started talking. And I before he left, I said, can I read this part of this book? It's one of my favorite books. And I take books with me, and I pulled this book. It's called My Teacher is an Alien. It's a fifth grade, fifth grade book. But I read the first few pages and I stopped it. And he goes, "What happens next?" I said, "I don't know." But I just stopped mid-line. And I goes, "Can I have this book?" And I said, "Yeah, you can have this book." And so sometimes it's like you said, the coach is reading, then I think I will read too, right? But tell me about parents. How do you engage, involve the families, the community, so they feel like partners?
Yeah.
Can I share one? Stephen?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So here's something that that I've been working with some people on for now a few years, but it's We Read Wednesday, and Blacks Mill Elementary in Dawson County, Georgia. They're not the only ones. Harmony Elementary and Pickens County, Georgia, they're doing it. There's a lot of people who are doing it. But it's simple. What do our parents like? They like to take pictures. So what we do is we ask them on Wednesday, read with your child, take a selfie, post it on our class dojo. It sounds so simple, but you know what? We win when people read, and we read on Wednesdays. Simple thing.
Yeah, and for us, Amelia, adopting that rejuvenated vision of being a literacy leader when I became a superintendent, literacy was the foundation for everything. It was the umbrella, not the spokes, right? The spoke part came in with, what are we reading? When are we reading it? What do we read next? Who's reading with us? Who's partnering? And so we started each academic learning day in the beginning in every school with 30 minutes of uninterrupted independent reading, right? Students reading what they enjoy reading for 30 minutes. And I wanted to get our parents engaged as partners versus them being consumers, right? For so long, parents have been consumers of public education, some. And I wanted our parents to be our partners. And so I asked them respectfully to do the other 30 minutes at home. And so I would send call alerts out, we're reading, I hope the televisions are off, and this is your 30 for 30. And in the age of social media, on Facebook, somebody shared a picture of a little girl after school on the tractor out in the field reading. And she said with her mom, "I can't go outside with you today." And her mom said, "Why?" And she says, "Because I have to do 30 for 30. I have to do the other 30 minutes. And her mom said, "Oh, grab your book." And I would go out as superintendent in the restaurants, and I'd see our kids in booths waiting for their food with books, reading with their parents. And so we started putting books in barbershops and beauty salons and laundromats. And we became a district whose culture was literacy. And 30 for 30 mirrored after the ESPN sports show. 30 for 30 meant we do 30, you do 30, we're partners in this literacy piece. And I can't tell you what happened after a year of that with our reading scores.
Can't wait.
Yes.
A lot of our parents right now are facing really difficult choices. They have multiple jobs and they want the best for their children, but their lives are tough. And that doesn't mean that there's nothing we can do about it. And how did you encourage people to work with kids directly? Because the little girl, you said the little girl said, "I can't do that. I have to do that." She internalized it was her responsibility. What were some of the things that you did to include the kid when the parents could not provide the support? They wanted to partner, but their lives were such that they were not available.
Well, I think, I'm glad you used that as an example, because that young girl who was an elementary school student knows the culture at school. And we fail to realize that many of our children are with us more than they are with people they live with, right? In terms of real-time face-to-face interaction. She knows that her friends were going to come to school the next day talking about what they read. And so it's competitive. I mean, we went further to when we were away, knowing that our children are going to be away from us, Thanksgiving, Christmas, spring break. What do? Well, you have a competition to log the students who are reading the most minutes. And then you come together with that, and we identify who the students are. And then we go to their home and we put a sign in their yard, a big sign that says "Extraordinary Reader lives here." And I'll never forget a little boy coming up to me.
Awesome.
Little boy came up to me one day and he says, "Hey, Dr. Peters, my mama told me to ask you how we get one of those signs in our yard." and so it becomes a competition among the students because they want to be in on that. They want to make their parents proud. Their parents want to be proud. And so school-wide, district-wide.
Questions. We have some questions, Stephen, that say, how do you build partnerships with parents that may not be literate or may not value literacy? There are also questions related to, is there a standard assessment to knowing a child? And I think, like, when I'm talking to a first grader and I'm trying to find out about their literacy lives, there are certain questions I ask. As they get older, there are other questions I ask, because the bottom line is I want them to develop an avid life of readership, right? So by second, third grade, if a kid has not fallen in love with a series, I get worried. And I'm going to make sure they're going to find a series. If they, by sixth grade, they're not expanding the types of genres, if all they read is graphic novels, I'm going to make sure they're going to find other genres. So it really is developmental. What matters is that you are sitting with them frequently and they know you're not going to go away every day, right, Stephen? That's the culture. But can you talk a little bit about, like, how do you build partnership with a parent or with illiterate parents? That's I am quoting the question.
Yeah, and that's a valid question. It's in real time what many schools are facing right now, right? But I truly believe that the message that we send to our families, all families, irregardless, is every generation and every family should get better. And when we agree on that, then we have expressed permission to help them make their families better, right? Excuses, no excuses, because the bottom line, as hard as this work is, as difficult as the pre-K-12 space is to navigate, guess what? The work still has to get done. And so my response to your question is the work still has to get done, whether the parent is illiterate or not. We still have to educate that child, because that's what equity is, right? And in the age and space and spirit of equity, we think about that meme that so many of us have seen, where there's a fence and, if the child is short, you're going to get a taller stool to stand on. If you're shorter, you're going to get you don't need that much of a lift. Well, let's stop thinking about what students need to stand on and let's get rid of the fence. Right?
Yeah, that's all. Yes. I don't like that graphic. Yes.
Yeah. So we get rid of the fence by really understanding that the bottom line is the bottom line. That child needs to have a better life than her parents. And what are the conditions that the school district and the school and the classroom can create to make that happen? Bottom line for me is I believe that we can produce whatever kind of schools of success we want to. We have to create the conditions for those things to happen.
We have 5 minutes left, and my last question is always, what's left unsaid? What is something that you wanted to talk about? We ran out of time, but don't worry, we're gonna have you back. Mark, I'm gonna start with you. What is left unsaid? What do you want people to walk away with?
Well, first, I want to thank you, Amelia, for having me on, and it's always a pleasure to be with Stephen and to be here with our audience and to be here for ARC. Thank you for the opportunity. One thing I would share is this: environment influences behavior tremendously. People go to Disney World, they all wear a yellow shirt, everybody in their family. There's not a day that they all wear the same shirt, but they do at Disney World because there's an environment there that makes them act that way. That's how strong that culture is for them. Schools have the same thing. We get people to wear t-shirts too. We get people in FFA, they wear corduroy jackets, for crying out loud. So like, we are able to do a lot of things through the strength of our culture and our environment to drive behavior. So here's how I tie that in, Amelia. How can we build a culture of literacy within each of our schools? A culture of loving to read, a culture where reading isn't down to just one or two people to make sure that people have a reading series they've started, but it's a collective that all around the school, people are asking kids, hey, what you reading? That we create space administratively for kids to have book clubs with each other.
Yes.
So Stephen Peters and I, here's a fun fact. Both of us really love rap music. Actually, one of us loves it more, and that would be me. So it's true. But one of the things I love.
Okay, we need a session on just that.
we can. I could get some ludicrous quotes going, but we'll save that for another session. But so here's the thing. One of the things I like about rap is it samples from different songs. That sample makes this familiar piece where the artist is able to share the thoughts they want to share in that song in an environment that's safe for people. See, that's a smart way to do with school. In other words, what do people already do? We make things so complicated sometimes in school.
Mhm.
Stop making things complicated. You know what? Start with what do people like?
Yeah.
Well, you know, parents like to take pictures. Boom, we've got that. You know what else? Kids like other kids. There's a school I work with, and the fifth graders go down to the first graders, but they don't go and read to them. They go and listen to them read. And the fifth graders who go down there and do that, they're not necessarily the best readers, but it helps them value reading because now that they have a reading buddy, they see, I need to step up my game too. When we create this space, we're able to do things. You know what else kids like? They like each other. So book clubs with pick your friends. It's fine. We'll find a place for everybody. Take what people know, sample things so that you can make your own awesome rap song.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephen, what's left unsaid?
Yeah, so I think Mark just really captured the essence of this conversation. I want to thank American Reading Company. I want to thank everybody who is on with us today. And I saw in the chat box that my good friend Abdul is here from Ghana. And want to give him a special shout out for the work that he's doing in Ghana, especially with girls in Ghana around literacy and reading. It's amazing how we can come together in this virtual space, and somebody from Ghana, Africa is here with us. But thank you to everybody who's with us. Continue to do great work in the world. And a special shout out to Jane Howman for her genius vision around American Reading Company.
Thank you. Thank you.